I'm Greg with Greg's Tattoos and Greg's Airbrushing, and today we are going to break down and clean our Iwata HPBCS. This is my go-to airbrush, and this is pretty much all I prefer to use. Now, of course, I have different brands and models of Iwata, but Iwata is my go-to airbrush. I'm gonna make this real simple for you guys. So let's jump right in and get to it. As you can see, Trevor moved the camera in so you guys can get a better look on what it is I'm doing. So try not to get caught up on the names of these parts, but I do want you to have some sort of understanding what they are and what they do. This back guard is going to protect your needle. So if you were to drop this here, it's not going to send your needle through your nozzle. So I'll show you a little bit later on what I mean by that, but once I break it down. So this is also one of the parts that I wouldn't stick in water, so to say. You can take some Windex or just rinse it in the water, so to say. There's a little bowl right here, rinse it, and you're done. Wipe it off, do whatever you have to do if you got paint on it or what have you, okay? So I'm gonna just move the water out of the way, and I'd put a little bit of soap in it. It's the stuff that you can find around the house. Also, I take a little bit of Windex, pour it in the water, and again, it's just your feel, and I'd soak my parts that need to be in the water. If they don't need to be soaked, just wipe it off and get ready to put it back on the airbrush once it's clean. So I'll move the water out the way, and right here you'll see this here is a needle locking nut. What it's gonna do is it's actually gonna pinch down onto the needle. So it's going to keep the needle from sliding forwards and backwards, so to say, unless you pull the trigger back, okay? So I'm going to take my needle locking nut off, stick it into my solution. I'm going to slide my needle out, okay? And make sure that I am not damaging the front of my needle here. Sometimes when I need to clear the hole out on the top of my bottle, I may use my needle backside of it to punch a hole into the top of my paint bottle, but that's the only way I would use the needle. So I'm gonna just sit it here. Cleaned it off already. Once again, that's one that doesn't need to be soaked unless you got a lot of paint built up on it. All right, now this right here, I just refer to it as a spring and shaft housing. Okay, of course, here's your spring. We'll go ahead and drop that in our solution, drop this in the solution. And this here is our shaft. This is our, like the needle shaft, is what the needle goes through. And you can see right here, there's like a cut within it. It's just to make sure that it's put back into the body of the airbrush the right way, okay? And to keep it from moving around. So there's a little screw inside your airbrush body when you go to take it apart that fits like right, it'll slide right into this area, keeping it locked in place, okay? And you'll see that. All right, so we're gonna soak that as well. And here's where it starts to get tricky for most people. Once you pull out your trigger, there's a little strike plate that goes inside the airbrush, and let's just take a look at that. This right here used to drive most people crazy, and in some Iwatas you'll see that this here is actually attached to your shaft, so to say. So it's attached to it like this here. But in this case here, I'm not sure if it's because of the model or because it's an older style Iwata, but now they make them to where they're all attached. Okay, so you don't really have to worry about breaking it down with every little piece, so to say, because you can take the shaft and the spring and the housing all out at the same time. But of course here it's individual, but I'll show you guys how to put this back in the airbrush. This right here usually scares a lot of people. Now, inside the body of the airbrush, there's a little strike plate. And here's another reason. I'm just gonna use my needle to kind of show you guys what I mean. So right inside the body, right here where your airflow flows into your Iwata, there's a little strike plate in there and it's spring loaded. That's where your trigger nipple right here slides into, okay? Now that's kind of hard to get in your first couple of times doing it, but just a little practice will work. I'm gonna just show you where it bounces. See that? I don't know if you can kind of see my hand spring loaded or not, but there's a spring and a little strike plate in there, okay? All right, that's where your trigger nipple is going to slide into, okay? This right here, let me just wipe this off so my hands are not so wet. This here is just your nozzle housing assembly, and I'm gonna try to unscrew all this with my hand. And when you get your airbrush, there's gonna be a little wrench that comes with it. I try not to wrench my airbrushes with a regular channel lock, so it looks like you have teeth clawed into your airbrush right here. But I'm gonna see if I can get this off here. Let's see here. All right, let me grab one and I'll be right back to you guys. All right, so I'm gonna take my wrench now and just go ahead and quick turn. And we have our nozzle housing assembly and needle guard, our nozzle guard, and also our nozzle, and we're just putting it in our bowl. It's just right here. Our mill quick disconnect, and of course we have our body. But I want you guys to also make sure that you don't lose or take off this O-ring right here. You're gonna need that, okay? So make sure that when you're cleaning your airbrush that this doesn't come off and you don't put it back on. Just make sure you put it back on. All right, so we're gonna let this soak for a few minutes. Let's see here. Also, if you're going to use the lube, I would suggest you definitely use the lube, but you gotta be careful with how you go about using it. And remember, anything that I'm sharing with you guys today is just, it's the way I like it. I prefer it, so to say. So I know there's gonna be some people out there that speak to the technicalities of using certain terminology and stuff like that. Hey, airbrushing is fun, and I'm here to keep it fun. All right, so I've taken the top off of my lube here, my Iwata lube, and watch how I put this on the airbrush, so to say. I'm gonna make on our needle. I'm gonna make sure that I'm not putting it near the tip of my needle, okay? Because, and we're not gonna put a whole lot on there as well. We're just gonna put some right here in the middle and make sure it's good to go. I'm gonna even stay away from the back area, because here in this general area back here is where our needle locking nut is going to be at. So I don't want it to be slippery there because it may cause my airbrush to slide a little bit more than I need it to. Also, as long as my trigger is able to move like this right here, swish it around in our water, dry it off, keep it simple. There's no paint in here. If you have an old needle, Usually it has paint caught right here in this general area. That's where your needle slides through. Use the old needle, don't use your new needle to clean out that area. And I'm just gonna put a little bit right here, okay? And now I'm going to start putting my airbrush back together again. All right, guys, so as you can see here, I have everything broken down. And remember, the airbrush that we're breaking down is a Iwata HP BCS, okay? And as you can see in our little solution right here we generated a little earlier, I have the little wire brushes. They're assorted sizes, and went ahead and cleaned out my airbrush, its parts, and I'm ready to rock and roll as far as putting it back together again. Okay, so I'm right-handed, so all you lefties out there, it's gonna be a little tough for you, but you do it a couple of times, you'll get it. Okay, the first thing I normally start off with is the trigger. I'll grab the body like so, and the trigger like so. This right here is very, very important concerning putting it back together again. All right, now remember, there's a little strike plate that we're trying to get, so we're gonna slide it over. I've just slid it through the top of the airbrush, and now I'm just gonna feel my way to the strike plate, and once I have it, drops right in, and I test it by checking to see if it's spring loaded, and it is. Also, it's going backwards and forward, so I know it's locked in. And back in the day, we didn't have the kind of suction sort of grip that it has, and every time we turned it sideways, the trigger would just fall out and we'd have to start all over again. All right, now, again, this little strike plate, and of course, I'm not using all the right terminology for the parts, but it's not about that right now. It's about just showing you guys how to put it back together again. So everyone out there who's the terminology police, hey, I'm sorry. All right, so we're gonna slide this in, and we're gonna slightly turn it. Okay, it's ready to rock and roll. Now, the nipple in and of itself, okay, is gonna fall forward, okay? I'm gonna try to get it as close to this as possible. You'll see it leaning up against. Now, if it's not, it's backwards, okay? If it's not leaning up against the trigger, it's backwards. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and slide the shaft in place. To have kind of pinch up against the strike plate here. I'm also going to put a little bit of our lube on our spring. And remember, you just need a little bit. A couple dabs will do you. Okay? Spin it around. It's good to go. Spring and shaft housing. You can, if you want, put a little bit of lube on the threads right here. Just a little bit. And a rule of thumb is that I just tighten it until you can't tighten anymore, and then one big pull back, complete turn back, okay? If it's one, a little bit, 1.5, that's no problem, but I know it's ready to rock and roll. Smooth, I like that. Now, I'm gonna turn the body up vertically, okay? And I'm gonna put my nozzle right on top, and my nozzle housing assembly. And guys, I know you know, well, I was expecting for you to know, but it separates in 3 pieces, but you don't need to separate it all, okay? You don't need to separate it all. This is one of those pieces where if you don't disturb it, you're not gonna need to ever break it down unless you have a accident where the paint just explodes in your airbrush or what have you. Then of course you can break it down. But I like to try to keep it all together at one time. Keeps it simple, and you don't have to worry about every little piece. So I'm gonna go ahead and place it back over the top of our nozzle, and it's good to go, okay? Now, again, I know we put a little bit of lube on our needle earlier. Just make sure, just a little. We're gonna put our needle in, and I like to have my back finger one of my fingers help me guide it in so it doesn't bend it in any way. And boom. And I just lightly tap it to make sure it's flush. Now, the inside, the inner workings of the airbrush and stuff like that, I have a video that shows you how the breakdown of the airbrush works and the functionality of it. Take a look at that airbrush too, or that video as well, after you look at this one, so to say. It'll really help you kind of demystify the airbrush. Okay, so now my needle locking nut, I just pinched it down. So our needle now is going to slide the way we want it.
There you go.
It's gonna slide the way we want it, when we want it. And of course, check out that video. The video has to do with demystifying the airbrush. And it'll show you how, with this locking needle nut, how the needle itself is separated from the nozzle. Matter of fact, I'm gonna take this off so you guys can see it. All right, so here's our nozzle right here, and we got two evenly spaced holes right here, okay? And that's where our air is coming out of, okay? Now, watch what happens when we move the trigger back. Watch the needle here. You see how it creates a gap within the nozzle itself? That's what we're looking for, okay? Just clean that off a little bit. And everything that I'm doing is not hurting the airbrush at all. What I like to try to do is I like to try to move the needle back so it doesn't get bent in any way. And you know what? I'm gonna do this here too. I'm gonna show you guys this here too. To know if your nozzle is good, just take a look at the top of the cone. And if there's a gash or split in it, there's your problem, okay? All right? Try to be real careful with these because the needle and the nozzle are gonna be probably the only parts that you're really gonna have to replace on a regular basis, so to say, if 2 weeks, 3 weeks is a regular basis or what have you, because I go through so many of them that you guys may not have to worry about it unless you drop the airbrush itself. But there's gonna be a problem. That's your problem right there. If you have your needle and your nozzle together and you drop your airbrush on the needle itself, it's gonna bend your needle and it's gonna split your nozzle. And that's like 70% of the time, that's definitely gonna happen. And that's where your problem's gonna be at, okay? So let's go ahead and put this back together again. And that would conclude this exercise right here. So let's put this back together, and I hope that it makes it a whole lot easier for you guys to get familiar with your airbrush. And let's see here, let's go ahead and put the needle guard back on it, and our male end of our quick disconnect. Okay, this right here, I'm gonna show you guys this here too, goes to my Iowata hose, and boom, it snaps right into it. This is your female end of your quick disconnect, and this is your male end, okay? And this is how I like to operate. I don't like to use the jungle hoses. I mean, some people do like it, and it's okay, but I like to be able to just grab a airbrush and a bottle that's attached to a bottle of color, just snap it right in, and I'm ready to go. And I only need one hose to do that. It's just so much easier and cleaner for me. So, all right, I'm Greg with Greg's Airbrushing and Greg's Tattoos. Hopefully this right here works for you guys, it helps you guys, and I'll see you soon.
Hey, like and subscribe to Greg's Airbrushing.